By way of introduction, and by the way, you can find out all about me on here, and you should visit there because you can get all the slide sets I've ever produced. In more or less a sentence, for the aficionados of Big Bang Theory, I have 2 doctorates and my wife calls me Sheldon, so there are similarities. So what I want to do is give you a slightly different view of the world and some of the causality. It looks like things are happening randomly, and actually they're not. And I want to start with warfare. When we think of conflict and warfare, we see this kind of thing. It's been continuous in one country and another. And I have to tell you that there is a war that is now global. It's 24/7, and there's no escape for any of us. And it's not this kind of a war. Indeed, that one, and it poses a much bigger threat than all of these. The cyber war you know about, but much more importantly, is the information war and the distortion of our concepts and realization of reality. And the danger is that the real catastrophe will be triggered by misinformation or fake news or whatever, and that will trigger some cataclysm. So there is now just one war. For the first time ever, 5 years ago, the American government declared that they can no longer defend their population. No government can now defend us. We have to defend ourselves. We're reliant on companies and individuals for our defense. And so, by way of dramatizing this, when you think of a failure or death, it always comes from a direction you're not looking, by a mechanism you didn't anticipate at a time that's really bloody inconvenient. And it's always a surprise. So here's the perceived threatscape, and what is interesting is that the insider threat isn't recognized as a priority, but it's actually one of the biggest threats, and the IoT is missing altogether. And the IoT is going to magnify the attack surface of this planet thousands of times. It will make us much more vulnerable. And so here's the people problem. We're just extremely fallible. We make mistakes. We're really challenged by the speed of change. And you can see people reeling and having great difficulty. Let's just do a quick test. How many of you got artificial intelligence in your home? Okay. How many of you got it in every single room? In the garden? Good. It's spreading. And the people who object to it really have to try it, and try it for quite some time. Otherwise, they have no opinion that's worth listening to. If you don't experience things, you can't say much about them. So the key thing is we have to take away the security problem from people. We, including myself, as an engineer, scientist, are fundamentally incapable of protecting ourselves against the threat. And what the industry does is ships us products that are incomplete. And so the threatscape is massive, and it's actually growing. And we don't really have, if somebody gets attacked by some 16-year-old kid in a bedroom with a laptop and he breaks into the server and does some damage, then that's just ridiculous. That's just stupid companies and individuals, because the 16-year-old kid doesn't know anything. It's these boys and girls we've got to worry about, the criminals and the rogue states. They've got billions of dollars to spend. The amount of money now made by the criminals is about 2/3 the GDP of this nation each year. It's a vast industry. These people are up to something entirely different. And so we need to start rethinking and looking at what we do. So here's a reenactment of Edward Snowden just walking out of the NSA with a stack of information. It is so easy. So I have a number of unusual hobbies, and one of them is seeing what I can get through airport security without getting caught. And I've gone through with complete electrical toolkits, all kinds of stuff. And the trick is to know a couple of things. You need to know a little bit about magic, and you need to know quite a bit about engineering and how the scanners work. And so I always think of the security at airports as the theater of security, and a lot of the trickery is down to distraction and bravado. Just doing things very confidently. And you can actually get away with murder and all the crimes leading up to it. The other trick that you can pull is to look hapless and hopeless, and people will rush to your aid. People are very kind. So if I'm asked to break into a company, I purposely put on a suit, walk around with a folder of papers and a laptop, looking bemused, and somebody will come up to me and say, "What's the problem?" And I say, "Well, I can't get on Wi-Fi." I say, "Yeah, let me do it for you." And I'm in. It's as easy as that. So I look for nice, kind people, and it works very well. So this one is designed. It might be designed specifically for women, but I think it pulls on the heartstrings of a man as well. So give this a try.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry. I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
At gmail.com?
Jessica gets access to my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account.
Jess uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry, so there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked.
Whoops. That was so easy, wasn't it? All you've got to do is be a good actor, actress. Brilliant. So what actually fixes a lot of this is behavioral monitoring. If we monitor people and equipment and establish behaviors, so let me run through an example. If I go into my company every day and I sit at my desk, I walk in at 7:30, make a coffee, switch on my machine, start downloading my email at 8 o'clock, and during the day I move files around and I shift about 1 gigabyte of data a day. And then one day I'm in at 6 o'clock. I don't bother making a coffee. I power up my machine and immediately I start downloading and I bring down about 80 gigabytes of stuff and I upload about 20. Somebody somewhere ought to be smart enough to ask the question, what the heck is happening? And that is what actually happens. People do that, nobody notices. You can see it with the machines, you can see it with the people behaviors. And so here, AI is being used to look for people who are using trickery to win. This is the Chinese manifestation of facial recognition, where you get points for behaving yourself and lose points if you buy beer or wine or misbehave in any way. And so citizens in China have suddenly found themselves advantaged or disadvantaged to the point where they can't get on a train or fly. So this is a bit of a dystopian future that we really don't want. So the IoT challenge is that the surface for the attack, this is a minimal number. People talk about having as many as 50 billion devices online. I think that's rubbish. It's going to max out at about 100 times that, at least. And so we have no means at the moment of doing much about it, and China makes all the devices, and so this Huawei thing has been very amusing to me. I'll ask you all a question. Do any of you know where the chips are made in your mobile phones? Do any of you know where your mobile phones and or your tablets and laptops are made? The vast majority are made in China. If Huawei are doing it, then what are the rest doing? They're using the same chipsets. It's ridiculous. Anybody know where the software is being written? Exactly the same shops. So this thing about Huawei is a political campaign to try and disable China. It's nothing to do with security whatsoever. So here's an autoimmunity solution. And you get a population of things in and around your home, and some of them are infected with malware. The autoimmunity system has to have at least one device that recognizes this as a rogue and then gets all the other devices to quarantine it whilst the antidote is downloaded and applied to cure the problem. Now, this is actually workable, but this is another aspect of this. This is a 2014 Jeep Cherokee, and it's taken over remotely from a hotel bedroom.
It's not fun to have your 2-ton SUV's brakes hacked just as you're parking in front of a ditch.
Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh.
That's what I've learned from Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, a pair of hackers who have spent the last year developing a piece of software that can wirelessly sabotage this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. It hasn't been altered in any way. There are no devices attached to it. But like many thousands of Jeeps around the world, it can be remotely hacked over the internet through a cellular connection to it.
What is worrying is that's just through the entertainment system. We are going to absolutely bathe all our vehicles and Internet of Things devices, all of which are going to have vulnerabilities. So it won't be a question of getting in through the entertainment system, it'll be getting in through the wing mirror or the suspension system. This is sort of definitely worrying. So one sort of upside to this is vehicles in particular have multi-channels. So if you've got a top-end car, you will have automatic braking on it because there's a sensor system on the front. The cars are going to start talking to each other. There will be 3, 4, 5G, but there will be Bluetooth and be Wi-Fi and so on. And so if the car does get infected, you can go in through multiple channels to try and correct that. But it's a little bit disturbing. So here's an actual copy of the biological attack. And this phalange is seeking out and destroying bad cells. Doesn't go for viruses because they imitate good cells or camouflage, but they just got one. So that's roughly what we're doing with the technology. Here is a map of a country. You'll see malware starting to spread, and that's the red bits. And now, as it spreads, you'll see green patches starting to spring up, and they're outnumbered, but the green start to communicate and start to fight the spread of the malware. And now you have to think that the malware is not just being communicated and traveling on wireless and optical fiber, it's in people's hands, on and off vehicles, flying and all the rest. And gradually the system fights back and bingo, we self-correct and kill this attack before it gets too serious. This is a very slow rendition. This happens in a matter of minutes, not days. So that's an obvious thing. So now let's just move on to the world in which we live and how irritating it is. Lies, half-truths, and distortions abound in politics, but in other places as well. There's now an awful lot of dogma and even censorship, and ultimately it leads to a society none of us want to live in. We are on the verge in the Western world of losing a grip on democracy. And the liar-in-chief has got an unenviable record. This is only in the first 10 months the serious lies, 103, Obama down here. Now let me qualify this. What we call a lie might be a misinterpretation and an error, and so they go under the general category of lies. And I think Obama may have stretched a few things. This guy is into gross distortion on a vast scale. So what he's actually now done is legitimize telling lies. It's okay to lie, as the message that's gone out. And so we have this very difficult situation where societies have been polarized in the United States and here. And
there's much we can do to bring our nation together. For example, those engaged in the political arena must stop treating political opponents as being morally defective.
This guy's a liar.
Lying Hillary, that lying. She is a liar. Lying Ted Cruz. Crooked Hillary. She's a nasty person.
He's a nasty guy.
He's a nasty guy. Nobody likes him.
Crazy Bernie. He's crazy as a bedbug.
how the heck did that happen? How did we get him? So we now have an enemy within our own society. It's not unusual now for leaders and bankers and politicians, and activists, managers, the media to tell lies to their own purposes. So let me tell you why this is really worrying. This guy has a plan. I'm now going to roll out his battle plan, and it is a battle plan, and it's well underway, and this was disclosed by an effector who spilled the beans on this. So a lot of what we're actually suffering is not some kind of accident or people's incompetence, but this is a planned 4-stage war. First of all, you demoralize people. It takes about 15 to 20 years. It's well underway. Everybody's ratted off with politics and Brexit and all the rest, and you only start re-educating one generation of students to change their perception and thinking. And then you start to target the essential structural elements, and you've probably seen the number of attacks in the United States on power stations and water supplies and all of those things. And recently, an extraordinary step has been taken where the Americans have attacked back, because until recently, the cyber war and the information war has just been the West is a punch bag and not reacted. And all of a sudden, the Americans have given these guys a little bit of a fright. It may work, it might not. And so the final stage, 6 weeks, violent disruption, and you take over. So this is the sort of battle plan, and it's very worrying. So here we are. We have misinformation and propaganda 24/7, and critical thinking is now as dead as a doornail. The BBC no longer has debates, they have shouting matches. And roughly speaking, people sit in this category. I'm right, you're wrong, and so you're an idiot. And that's the sophistication we now live with. And so there's no listening, there's no art of debate anymore, and there's very little thinking. Everybody, because of social network, has got an opinion on everything, even though they know nothing. And of course, as stated by Mr. Gove, the British people are fed up with experts. Well, if you think experts are expensive, you wait till you try ignorance. So the whole value stack of society is being devalued, and it's not that it's not happened before, but before it happened very slowly. So you'll notice how much these people are communicating with each other. And if you can remember, I'm looking at the age group here, you can all remember going into a library and you went in there and nobody talked to each other, and they sat in isolation looking at books. And now we have people complaining that people sit looking at their screen instead of talking to each other, when actually they're communicating through their books. And I always say to people, do not confuse a live conversation with something that's on messaging or an email or a social network. So this was a really bad time. I'll give you a benchmark. I was born into a home with no electricity. I can remember wireless arriving, and before that time, we used to go to the park on a Sunday to listen to a colliery band, and that's within my lifetime. Go back just a couple of generations, my grandfather went down a coal mine at the age of 11 years old to join his mother. And so when we look at the appalling conditions in places like India or other nations, think of a timeline that slips. It's not so long ago, and people have got very short memories. So here's some worrying things. Ask yourself where you sit, because if you sit right over here, your opinions and views are largely incomplete and totally distorted. And if you live entirely over here, your opinions are mostly very thin and very often superficial. So this is the dilemma. We are being inundated in a way that you can't remember. I have to confess now, not only do I no longer read books, I will never ever in my life read another book. And the reason is very simple. A new book is published every 13 seconds. Which one should I read? So I've developed what I call the cocktail party system. The British are very snobbish about wines, and they're very snobbish about what you read. So I'm at a cocktail party or some gathering, and somebody will come up and say, have you read this book? I say, no. And they say, oh, you should. And I say, well, what's in it? They can give me a 10-minute précis, and I've just saved 5 hours. That's brilliant. And, it takes an awful lot of reading to get the gems out of any document. And so nobody fact checks anything, and students no longer use libraries. And if it's not on the internet, it doesn't exist. I'm finding students doing PhD projects on stuff that was done 40 years ago, but they've not bothered to do any background reading beyond what's on the internet. It's really quite worrying. So this is absolutely vital. I've built a social network that spans about 30 million people. I have been invited, and I have invited people to a core of about 10,000 people. And then one step after that, it goes out to something like 1.2 million, and then after that it goes to the 30 million. So if I have a problem or I find something interesting, I go out and immediately I start to get feedback. But it's a great way of trying to find stuff. We're not short of stuff. The problem is finding good stuff. And you then have to be aware of the rabbit holes. So my wife has developed a terrific technique to prevent her sliding down a rabbit hole that's very comfortable, where you go and make friends with all the people you like and all the people that agree with you. And it's really comforting because you're all talking in the same way and you're all agreeing. So she actually makes friends with people she really hates and detests. And then she gets a wider world view, and she is my barometer of what is actually happening in the far-right religious nutcase society in the United States. It works a treat. So keeping up with this is exhausting. I don't know anyone, including me, who doesn't get tired of this thing, and we need to automate a shed load of this stuff to provide some kind of shielding so that we don't have to worry about it and it's taken care of. So let's just have a look at some extreme weapons.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. That's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward in the age of information is going to be the difference between whether we survive or whether we become some kind of fucked up dystopia. Thank you. And stay woke, bitches.
Now this is actually a bit expensive in time and computing power, so let me show you something that's even more frightening. This works from just a picture, a photograph of you. It works even better if there is a movie of you saying something. All you have to do is capture the face and the prime movements and features of the face, and this is what you get. Now just look at that. This is the synthetic one. Put it in any kind of clothing you like. This is the starting point. And it's so very easy. It can all be synthesized, and it can be done in minutes. So there's now a huge effort to be able to detect this kind of attack and to take it down or discredit it. And you've probably been taken by, you've probably been duped, because I have, by some of these things. I thought they'd been okay, but on deep inspection, I've found that they've not been true. The good news is that it's not the technology. Technology is never, ever malevolent. None of it has ever harmed a human being. It's human beings that teach the damn technology or use the technology to do bad stuff. One example. Well, isn't that great? Notice this here. It's not Boston Dynamics, it's Boston Dynamics. This was done as a demonstrator. This is a deep fake video. It never happened. Damn convincing, though. You could put all kinds of things up on the news. So we now can auto-detect some of this, but it's not easy. So here's a quote. By the way, none of my students know who Isaac Asimov is. I'll just let you read that. Doesn't this ring true? We now make celebrities of complete idiots, and we make heroes of complete fools. And we deride people who have deep knowledge and understand things. And only in the West are people proud to state that they know nothing about mathematics or science and technology. Only in the West. It would be unthinkable in the East. So I'll give you a demonstration now of deep ignorance.
If you met someone from Amsterdam, what nationality would they be?
I have no idea. Amsterdamian.
Amsterdamian.
I'm not going to play anymore. It's depressing. But geez, really? The vast majority of Harvard graduates have no idea where the seasons come from. And I've had one of the world leaders of AI at my home. I took him down to Woodbridge. The tide was out, and he asked where the water had gone. And I said, well, it's the tide. What's the tide? Well, it's due to the moon. And he looked at me like, you're an Englishman taking the piss again, aren't you? And it took me ages to convince him that the Earth is an oblate spheroid that pumps in and out with the position of the moon and the sun. So what's really worrying is that lies and fake news are just so easy to absorb, and the truth is difficult to actually absorb and take in. It takes energy. So it plays, fake news plays to people's dispositions. There's no thinking. It reinforces prejudice, and it creates social division on a false basis. Really, really worrying stuff. So here's a balancing act. Right at the bottom down here, we have thousands of years of discovery, science, engineering, philosophy, thinking, establishing facts that we can base our engineering and infrastructures on, and our industries. And then at the top, we've perhaps got the most wobbly bit, where people are now making incredible decisions. We are investing in green technologies that are wrong, that will not actually improve our lot. And it's a complete and utter social or societal fabrication. And we're wasting a huge amount of money. A good one is the smart meters, 11 billion. Interesting. No country on the planet has put smart meters in and seen a dime returned for that investment. And they're not going to see a dime here either. Wind farms, interesting. Solar panels, interesting. They can't provide the base load. And if we're not using something like nuclear power, which has killed a fraction of the percent of people that have been killed in the oil and coal industries, I don't know how we're going to achieve what we want. So this is the dangerous political media mantra. You know, truth doesn't matter. Well, it actually does. And I love this quote from George Orwell, and my students don't know who George Orwell is either. So what about countermeasures? Could we do something about it? So I'm going to quickly show you a truth engine. Supposing we could make a machine and we could do all of these things and we could purge the net of all the falsehoods, how happy I would be. Well, we can actually do the first two. That third one is tricky, so is the fourth one. I don't know if we can do that, and I don't think there's a hope in hell of educating any society. It's not going to happen. So the thing we have to watch out for is the truth is not fixed. It's dynamic. And you see this most in science, but this is the story of the flat Earth. It was flat, spheroid, and then it became an oblate spheroid. This is best we've got. It's a dynamic oblate spheroid, and we only managed to establish that because of satellites and precise measurement. And so it's easy to categorize the lies, and these are experiments that have been done. This one we've got completed very recently, and this is still underway. This is where we start with a human model and then transcend it into the machine for it to refine the model. And like all of these things, the thing that you really worry about is your slide set not moving on one. Oh, all right. Let me just escape that. There we go. So what we need is a content or a meaning extractor that exists. We need fact checkers, and we need something that looks at style and behaviors, and we need trending analysis. And so, again, all of these exist, and this is the weakest one down here. This is incredibly strong. There's over 170 fact-checking organizations, and these are the core questions you might ask. Who's the author? Why did they publish? Who do they work for? What's their reputation? Are they paid or sponsored? Do they have a following? Do they use trusted sources? Do they have relevant expertise? And what's their purpose? And is the material current? And so on. And so all of this stuff we can pick up. We can automate all of that. And so the scale of the problem is enormous. So you can't tell from a viral posting whether it's been posted by a dozen sources or whether it was some guy in the backwoods of Kentucky in a shed who was feeling mean this morning. He puts it out, it goes viral, and it spreads. Well, now we can actually track back all the news reports through this myriad of servers right to the point where it originated. And if it's something wild and it comes out of one site, then it's easy to discredit. You might even want to take some action to neutralize it. So fact-checking, over 170 organizations. Notice that there are none in Russia or China and other states. And the snag is they're all people intensive, and they're just ripe for automation. They need aggregating. There's two here for you to try. I've got this app on my mobile phone and on my laptop. It's excellent. Anything that comes up, it will give me the results. So here's something of a conundrum. You'd expect these to be the most accurate sources of information in the world, and they're not. And nor are any of the science or social journals. And the reason is they're dealing with the leading edge reports and the status quo of our whole knowledge base. And so it's a function of the truth being dynamic, and it's quite difficult. So just recently, I was involved in this, and it was quite magical. We had 200 participants, 30 countries, an awful lot of teams. They were given 1 week to take AI and see if they could spot fake news and propaganda. Magically, in 1 week, their success rate, the top 10 success rate, was over 84% right off the bat. And the way it detects is the language, the words, the invective, the style, and of course, what the dark side will do once it knows about this is to start to change the way it writes. And the only thing that can keep up with this is the AI, which will track their biases as they move. So this was a great success, and I was really quite pleased. So here's one of the worst nightmares. These kinds of headlines, you know, nuclear nightmare is here, 2,000 dead, and so on. How true is it? Well, it's never true. This one just cracks me up. The inability of the human race to actually judge a risk. So here's a statement. We're going to have 2,000 disaster-related deaths. Actually, only one worker is acknowledged to have died due to radiation. However, nobody was mentioning this. 15,000 people were killed by the tsunami. This was the big headline, but nobody wanted to know that. So this is the disaster, the tsunami, not the nuclear plant. The nuclear plant is sort of inconvenient, and it's nothing like the number of people who would be killed in a mining accident in Chile or somewhere like that. And so this is just incredible to me that people haven't got the intelligence to look at it. So here's a timeline of the accuracy of a truth. You'll get a series of reports, and it might be 2,000 people killed, and then if there's a statement after that local sources have estimated 2,000 people have died, that's okay, because later on they'll say an official government assessment is 600 people died, and so on. And eventually it turns out to be 5. If the news reporting organization is actually refining the way they report, that's okay. But if they stick with the 2,000 and never retract or change it, then that's very damaging. So this is where you find the Sun, the Daily Mail, Fox, BuzzFeed, and so on, smack in the middle there. They don't check much, and they don't really retract anything. BBC, Public Broadcasting, Times, they're pretty good at checking things out. Beware Russia Today. They're very clever. They mix the truth with fake news very subtly, and it's very hard to detect where the seam is. So here are some manual results I did. I came up with these numbers, and recently, with my colleagues in Qatar, we have automated it, and you find the good old BBC is up there at over 98% accuracy with very, very few failings. Unlike Breitbart, who are just an absolute scurrilous organization. And so if you look at the BBC factual reporting and you look at the percentages, this is an enviable record, and what would you do with that? It can't be trusted. And yet, this is guiding a huge percentage of the American population. Daily Mail? Well, sort of. It's not something I choose to read. So another effort that's being put in, I'm just going to look at the chairman. Do you want me to wrap up quickly? Okay, let me just do another couple of things. So the slide set's available to you. A library of lies. We've got people building this, and it's not going fast enough, it's not big enough, and it needs an international effort. It's not hard to do, and there are legal things. So I'm just going to suggest you have a look at this, but this is just a summary of all the ridiculous claims and the actualities. So I'm going to pick one out along here. And so mobile phones, we all know they cook your brain. There's not been a single person suffer through using a mobile phone, but mobile phones have saved thousands of lives. You know, figure, what do you want? Let me give you an interesting one. How many people have had an MRI scan? Would you still have an MRI scan if I told you they'd taken a razor and taken the N off the front? Because it's nuclear magnetic resonance. And they took the N off because they knew people wouldn't go and have a scan if it had got nuclear on it. Isn't that terrific? I'll just skip through this. But it's obvious, the mechanism. So this is where we are. These black bits we've actually got built. And this bit is still being done. And this trending analysis is in its infancy, as I've just demonstrated. So gradually, all the bits are coming together. So my ambition is to automate all of this, and it has to be AI. So here's a closing thought.
What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
So we have a choice. Do you want to take the red pill, or do you want to take the blue pill? I just want you to think. If you do nothing, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. If you build a truth engine, you can stay in Wonderland and you might be able to show just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering you is the truth, nothing more. My quote, which is a bastardization of Morpheus and Neo's conversation in the Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.